Welcome back to The Guardian Film Show, your essential guide to the week's big releases. It's your best friend, it's your property, it's a cuddly toy. It's The Guardian Film Show, and it says, I love you.
Do you know who this man is? Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys.
Coming up on this week's show, Beach Boys maestro Brian Wilson sets out to battle his demons and produce a masterpiece in the biopic Love and Mercy.
Some call me loud. Most people think I kind of talk quiet, but that's...
The college set Dear White People rolls in to offer a crash course in racial politics. And it's grotesque, it's disgusting, it's the Human Centipede 3 final sequence. First up, we have Seth MacFarlane's sequel to the scatological blockbuster comedy that at least one august British publication hailed as the second best film of 2012. Is the old magic still there? Will lightning strike twice? This is Ted 2.
I don't know, Teddy. I mean, something's got to change, you know, because I can't do this no more. It's too much.
I know. And that's why I want to have a baby.
There comes a time in every bear's life when he needs to grow up, settle down and raise a family of his own. But what if the bear is just a toy?
You're on the stand. The DA says, Ted, do you consider yourself to be human?
Does he not think and feel like you and I? Ted 2 may just be the civil rights drama that America has been waiting for. And then again, it may not.
Oh my God! Who did that?
Joined by Henry Barnes and Peter Bradshaw. Peter, I believe you're a big fan of Ted 1.
I was indeed.
Big fan of Ted 2?
Yes, quite as much. I think it's really funny. It does what it sets out to do. It has been received with icy hostility by some American reviewers, apparently on the grounds that it failed to do anything other than make them laugh a lot at the press screening. And I can only say that at the press screening I was at, there were a lot of laughs.
There were?
There were a lot of laughs.
Unusually so.
Yeah, and I have to say that if a horror film was getting gasps that loud, we would be on for raves. But there's no doubt about it, Seth MacFarlane has had some career low points. He had the Oscar turn, which was terrible, and also A Million Ways to Die in the West, which I didn't like very much. I didn't hate it, but it was weak. And there are plenty of people who have, I think, rightly and justifiably held those against him. But the Teds are not among his career lows. The Teds and Family Guy, that is what Seth MacFarlane has done really, really well. I think it's great comedy. There is an element of satire, probably more in the first version, that it was about kidulthood and about male arrested development. Insofar, I wouldn't want to strain that point, but it was to a certain extent. But this is just offensive, incorrect, and very funny. And
Well,
I didn't have a problem with it.
If it's a satire on anything, it's a satire on American civil rights, isn't it? It sort of touches slightly on gay marriage, it touches on black civil rights.
Yes, it does slightly, but that I find part of its incorrect kind of offensiveness, that with breathtaking offensiveness, Ted can align himself with the slavery issue. But that is part of its offensiveness, which, again, I don't have a problem with because I can't take it seriously. He just blunders into these issues. Ted smashes his shin bone against all these issues, and the spectacle is simply absurd.
Yeah.
That, for what it's worth, is where I locate the attraction of the comedy. The satire is in male arrested development.
Yeah.
But what can I say? I think it's really funny.
Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm 26. What, is there a problem?
Well, you know, I just don't want my lawyer singing Frozen songs during the opening arguments.
The new addition to the cast is Amanda Seyfried.
Yes. Not a lot for her to do, although she does it with... she carries it off with absolute dignity. She pretends that she is sort of in love with Mark Wahlberg. And like the absolute professional that she is, I think she carries it off very well. She's a bit like Natalie Portman in Your Highness, as I remember. You know, absolutely no question that she is doing anything other than doing a professional job of work, and she does it very well.
Yeah.
And she carries off even, I don't know, the slightly unkind joke about her looking like Gollum, perfectly well, so I thought she was fine.
Ted, you're special. But what defines a person is making a contribution to society.
Take that, motherfucker! Hey, that's what you get for fucking exercising!
Embarking on his own personal freedom march, that's Ted 2. And sticking in a semi-similar vein, we now come to Dear White People, winner of the Audience Award at Sundance, and spotlighting a sense of racial identity that has become dangerously fractured and confused. Sam White is a mixed-race gadfly at exclusive Winchester College, intent on damning the white kids who act like black kids and the black kids who kowtow to the white establishment. She's hidden her Taylor Swift CD where nobody will spot it, and she's off to bring black back to Winchester.
I am indistinguishable from the so-called urban images of black folks used to amuse and market to white America.
Henry, as a noted gentleman of colour, did this film speak to you?
Yeah, it did. It did. It's clever. It's funny. It's very sophisticated. To me, it almost twists itself in knots in trying to say something new about race in America, which is an impossible task, but well done, the director, for trying it, I guess. It is trying to break new ground in how we talk about race, particularly in America, which is different to talking about race in Europe, obviously. And this idea that these racial cliques that are formed in college are the things that carry you through into the rest of your life as well, and there's not really any way of escaping your skin colour, obviously, but also the group that is defined for you by that. So yeah, it's interesting in that way. I did feel like it was a little too Wes Anderson-y and a bit too smart for its own good.
A lot
on
of
occasion.
tableaus, isn't there? That
Yeah.
sort of weird, sort of static kind of camera things.
And if the point is that nobody can really win in these situations, i.e. if you want to appropriate any part of another person's culture, you are going to fail. If you want to stay true to who you believe you are when you grew up in that way, you're going to fail at that too, then it's done a great job. But I didn't really feel like we left the film with any kind of proper message.
The tableau, the formalisation, the kind of Wes Andersonisation, I sat there thinking, this is great, but let's see you keep it up until the very end. And of course they don't. Or like all these kind of static, kind of stand-up comedy routine aspects to movies, they keep it for the first act, first 20 minutes, and then they have to develop and resolve the drama, and so it goes away. Particularly like showing text and tweets up on screen, eventually that just vanishes. It's always the same. What I think are fascinating about campus dramas and campus satires is that it's about pure ideas. All these people, they don't have to make compromises yet because they don't have to go out and earn a living. So you have a kind of knockabout of pure ideas and ideologies can butt heads in a campus environment in a way they can't in an office environment. It reminded me a little bit of Election, actually, Alexander Payne's Election, the idea of kind of almost Stalinist kind of cliques. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. The only thing I thought it slightly lost its nerve was the question of interracial sex. Now, it did interracial sex quite well. I mean, that is such a taboo, and it's still an incredible taboo in mainstream Hollywood cinema. But we're talking about a white person and a mixed race woman, so I felt we were slightly kind of flinching from the big one. But I mean, it's elephant in the living room stuff, and I thought it was very good.
It's very smart, and there's great kind of raw material there for a satire. But did you find it funny?
I did on occasion, but it's more kind of knowing smirk or like kind of raised eyebrow funny, like, oh, I recognise that, rather than laugh out loud stuff. And perhaps that would have improved it a bit for me, is really going for kind of outright laughs and being a bit Ted-ish almost, and being a bit outrageous and really pushing it. I do think that you come out of the film with this idea that, oh, right, black people can like Mumford and Sons too, which is a bit tired now and a little bit trite, if we're honest, but at the same time it's dressed up in this elaborate sophistication, which the director does really well. What it kind of reminded me of was a little bit of like a teen TV soap, like The OC or Friday Night Lights, but if they did race well and they were funny about it.
None of this changes the fact that the vibrancy, the complexity of black culture has been distilled into commodities and marketing schemes to be bought and sold.
To the detriment of the so-called real thing. Got it.
That's Dear White People, on hand to settle some scores. High time now for a little Love and Mercy, courtesy of the Beach Boys' Brian Wilson, reclining in California and dreaming of pet sounds, except that Brian, it turns out, has some issues of his own.
So it's the first beat on the last bar of the intro. Boom, 2, 3, 4, ba-doom.
Here's Brian Wilson in his 60s heyday as played by Paul Dano and determined to record the greatest album of all time. And here he is 20 years up the line in the guise of John Cusack, oppressed by his therapist, overrun by his demons. He needs love, he needs mercy, whichever comes first.
In or out? Come on. In. 1, 2, 3.
Peter, this is a biopic that was made with the tacit approval of Brian Wilson himself.
Yes.
Is that a blessing or a curse?
I think, on the whole, it's a blessing. I think it's a very absorbing and very, very heartfelt movie, which does a very good job of putting you inside Brian Wilson's mind, particularly at the very beginning. There's a really kind of excellent Super 8 style montage of their early years, their performing career over the opening credits, and then we go into the opening staves of Brian Wilson's upcoming mental breakdown as he has an anxiety attack on the plane, a mental breakdown which coincides with his creative dissatisfaction with what the Beach Boys had been doing and his terror of being literally out-evolved by the Beatles. I thought it was a really good film. I was absolutely absorbed by it. At the risk of being kind of almost Philistine in the face of the creativity and experimental quality of the film, I have to say I thought John Cusack wasn't as good.
Right.
I wondered would it have been so awful if just Paul Dano had played that role as well. In my heart of hearts, I sort of think it might have made it a better film, but I have to concede you would have robbed it of its strangeness and the dislocation which is there to pay a tribute to the dislocation and disconnection that Brian Wilson was experiencing and which all of his friends and colleagues experienced vis-a-vis their relationship with him. So, I mean, I really liked it. I think it was flawed. It's a really interesting, flawed film. Even its flaws, I think, are interesting.
It's great material, isn't it? I mean, even the stuff that they don't really go. I mean, I wanted to see more of sort of Dennis Wilson and the Manson connection and that, which the film just kind of totally ignores.
That was the big flaw for me, and I have to say I found the flaws quite boring. That you didn't really go into drugs, which surely played a massive part in all of their lives, and Dennis particularly, but also Brian. You know, that part of his mental illness was fueled by
drug use. Well, it had a little bit about it.
Well, also the relationship between mental illness, drugs, and creativity.
Yes,
as
but on the flip side of that, what I thought it did really well, and a couple of films recently have done really well, is it didn't say that mental illness and musical genius are the same thing. And they clearly show Wilson here annoyed by the ideas that he's having, as well as inspired by them, knowing that he can do this without being mentally ill or without drugs.
Paul Dano, I thought, took it to the next level. I thought it was a career high for him. I mean, however interesting he's been with, say, Paul Thomas Anderson, I always thought, well, here's a really interesting guy who hasn't quite clicked. But here, I mean, he absolutely inhabited Brian Wilson's personality.
And also a quick note about watching music being recorded or filming music being recorded. This film does it as well as something like 24-Hour Party People, where you feel like the creation of the music itself, the actual pressing the record and watching the musicians do their thing is fascinating and interesting, as it must have been, right? To see Brian Wilson just go free for all on his creativity. And the film does an excellent job of bringing that across as well.
Cut! I think we got it.
Paul Dano and John Cusack balancing the good vibrations with the bad on Love and Mercy. Now, regular viewers will know that we traditionally like to end these shows on a highbrow note, ideally with some challenging, auteurist European cinema. And this week is no exception. It's the Human Centipede 3.
Our prison, relatively, has the highest personnel turnover, violence rates, legal and medical costs than any other institution in the US correctional system.
Bill Boss is the harassed, hard-working warden of an overcrowded American prison who likes eating dried genitals and castrating his inmates, though not necessarily in that order.
Gentlemen, Mr. Tom Six.
And Tom Six is the Dutch director of the Human Centipede films, who provides him with a novel way of controlling the convicts. But obviously, let's not spoil the big surprise.
We've got to make a human centipede of our prisoners, sewn ass to mouth, sharing one digestive system.
Henry, it's all gone very meta, hasn't it, in the universe of the Human Centipede?
Yeah, and it had to, really. I mean, I have to admit, I haven't seen 1 or 2, so I'm coming at the tail end of this.
Missing a treat.
Really
missing a treat.
I mean, I think the telling thing is that I sat eating my dinner watching this, and I didn't stop eating. It says that the film isn't really disgusting enough, or funny enough, or gory enough. What it's great at is promoting Tom Six, promoting the franchise, bringing in this idea that his first 2 films were so influential and so genre-changing and pop culture defining that now there's the Human Centipede 3 can only be influenced by those first 2 films, and the fiction of it exists in a world where those 2 films exist, which is bizarre in its own sense and quite interesting, actually.
Gentlemen, you may use my Human Centipede idea, but on one condition. Now I insist on attending one of your real mouth-to-anus operations.
Is it a redundancy even to say it's ridiculous and over the top?
Well, you know, we talk about, you know, figures like sort of Sam Fuller and Todd Browning, and I think who's making that kind of movie now. And I think sort of Tom Six is, in a way. I think just as Lars von Trier has brought Mr. Udo Kier to a new generation, Dieter Laser, this frankly extraordinary actor, has kind of found his niche. I wonder if he can be used ever again. I lower my voice into a penitent whisper here, but I thought he was quite funny in this. He reminded me weirdly of Zero Mostel in The Producers in a way. So his mad, screaming arias, which would go on forever.
Shut the fuck up! I need to relax for a few minutes.
There is a true spirit of grindhouse and horror and nastiness in this film, and I have to say, it does have the courage of its horrible convictions. It returns the franchise to its dark origins, as we say. Is it having its Jurassic World moment? It's going back to the beginning, you know. It's very, very bizarre, but I have to say there is an element of comedy in it, and I do think that Dieter Laser, I mean, however bizarre he is rather extraordinary. And he's very watchable in his absolutely mad, megalomaniac, sadistic, screaming way. It is quite well made. It's, you know, blessedly short. The acting in it, however bizarre this is to say, is quite good. I mean, when someone like Eric Roberts shows up, you know,
as the governor.
As the governor, Julia's brother. Yeah, of course. Maybe Julia could come
that
on as well.
That would be great.
That would be great. But, you know, that's Human Centipede 4. Don't bet against Human Centipede 4, incidentally.
I think we're verging on the edge of saying this is a good film, and I should hasten to it. It's not a good film, and you shouldn't spend your money on a film.
I mean, is it? Peter's saying it's comedy.
I have to say,
satire?
It's not.
I mean,
it's so clumsy in that regard.
It's a bit of kind of Guantanamo there with the orange boiler suits, and
I think
occasionally
it's
it cuts
kind of
away to
brutal.
an American flag.
I think it's sort of brutal and mad, but I don't think it's a bad film. I think it's, for all its crassness, I would rather see this than any number of banal, middle-brow, vacuous things that we get pumped out of the chute every day.
I could just about pass this film off if you see it as a kind of visual metaphor for the Hollywood studio system, i.e. they're just regurgitating shit.
Oh, Henry, don't over-intellectualise.
Oh, don't overthink it.
They will literally be on their knees begging for your mercy.
The screaming grindhouse madness of the Human Centipede 3 final sequence. Just time now for a few of your questions. Peter and Henry, which critics do you personally admire?
This is a really interesting question. There are loads of critics that I admire. I very much like Anne Bilson, who sadly does not have a regular slot in the UK press, but still blogs. Among the American critics, I think Jonathan Rosenbaum, lately of the Chicago Reader.
Henry, what do you reckon?
I really, really like the guys who do Honest Trailers, which is a video series where they basically do a trailer pastiche and say what the film is really like. Tony Zoe is fantastic. He does a video series called Every Frame a Painting, and it's basically just a deconstruction of how directors' different tricks and tropes. Again, really clever. Again, a video review.
Which film has caused you to question the intelligence/sanity of your colleagues?
I can only answer this the other way around. There are lots of films which have caused everybody to question my sanity. It happens a lot. It happens over and over again. I've raved in the past about Only God Forgives, The Other Guys, which very, very funny film. The early Austin Powers movies I thought were hilarious. Again, I mean, I've been sort of confronted face to face by other critics, quite seriously confronted.
And then finally, switching the tone a little, is Kristen Stewart a good actor?
Yes, she is a good actor. I thought she was good in a film which on balance I didn't like, which is Clouds of Sils Maria. I thought she was very good, and she had an interesting relationship with Juliette Binoche in it. So yeah.
Adventureland, she's good in.
Yeah.
Small role in Into the Wild, which I thought she was good in.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, okay.
Great and Still Alice as well, very subtle in that.
Yes.
Very grateful that we end the show with Kristen Stewart as opposed to the Human Centipede 3, although of course if she crops up in the Human Centipede 4, the joke's on us. In the meantime, my thanks to Peter and to Henry and to you for watching. We're back next week.